Hello once again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Wednesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy. Up first, hazardous weather graphic, central interior, Tanana to Fairbanks down into northwestern Alaska range area, possibly Denali Park area, all under the influence of a dense smoke advisory for that area for tonight and into till about 1 p.m. tomorrow afternoon, due to smoke from the fires. Otherwise, no other watches, warnings, or advisories out around the state. So we'll just move right to the next graphic here. Fire danger. Not a lot of change from yesterday. Still very high to extreme fire danger in the Susitna Valley, with the extreme areas kind of the central northern Susitna Valley. And Matanuska Valley, the eastern side, some high to very high fire danger there. Or I'm sorry, on the western side of the Matanuska Valley. And then the Kenai Peninsula, high to very high fire danger, central and western Kenai Peninsula. And Copper River Basin, low fire danger now, and also up into the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, low to medium fire danger in that location due to recent shower activity. But the central Tanana Valley around Fairbanks area and just to the west there, areas of very high to extreme fire danger. And that same sort of condition extends westward and then southward. Northwest and west of the Alaska Range into the Kuskokwim Valley. Then it kind of fades to a high fire danger area there along the lower and mid Yukon River valleys, and then back to low out toward the coastline, of course. And then that big area up over the Yukon Flats of extreme fire danger continues there, surrounded by very high fire dangers. Koyukuk Valley into the portion of the Kobuk Valley, also high to very high. And the North Slope, some areas of medium fire danger with spot of high fire danger there over the east central North Slope locations, and also with the hot weather over the northern Panhandle, got some high to very high fire danger there up the Haines Highway, as you can see, over the extreme northern part of the southeast coast. And from there, moving on to satellite imagery. See low clouds, fog on the increase again over the Gulf of Alaska, slowly beginning to expand westward once again, just east of Kodiak Island. They're not quite into Prince William Sound yet, and an area of low cloud starting to develop south of the Kenai Peninsula. Otherwise, a pretty extensive area along the eastern North Gulf Coast down into the Panhandle and inland areas, burning off in the afternoon today. But still mostly cloudy skies down over the southern southeast coast with a few isolated showers around, a few hundredths of an inch falling at Ketchikan in the last 12 hours. But sunshine breaking out over the remainder of the Panhandle there. But that low cloud condition hugging the coastline. Lots of sunshine, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, even Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, right up into the interior, under basically high pressure aloft, and some shower and thunderstorm activity starting to crop up over the Wrangell Mountains and the eastern Alaska Range a little bit there, also over just east of Northway to west of Whitehorse, an area of convection. But nothing too widespread yet, but pretty clear skies all the way up toward Arctic Village. System bringing some moisture into the central or western Arctic coast, spreading eastward, running anywhere from 0.05 or a few hundredths of an inch to up to 0.2 to a quarter of an inch along the central coast of the Arctic coastal areas there, with Anatuvik Pass also picking up a quarter inch of precipitation, some showers there. Camden Bay had about 0.2 of an inch as well. And then Huslia, a few hundredths of an inch back down to the south there with less organized cloudiness. Huslia and Golovin both picking up a couple hundredths of an inch, otherwise dry down in toward Bristol Bay. System there just west of the Pribilofs, pushing a weak band of clouds into the St. Paul area, extending down to the Aleutians, bringing light amounts of precipitation in that area. Wind's not all that significant. Windiest area along the western Arctic coast from Point Hope up to the western Arctic coast there, anywhere from 20 gusts 35 miles an hour at the most. Otherwise, pretty light winds elsewhere around the state. On the chart today, you can see that weak system out over the Bering Sea, or that weak frontal boundary there right across the Pribilos down into the eastern Aleutians, western Alaska Peninsula, bringing the light rain, fog, and drizzle, cloudy skies there, with some another trough bringing an enhanced area of light rain to the central Aleutians, but amounts quite light. Otherwise, the interior, same story, smoke west and north of the Alaska Range. Some of that filtering into south central Alaska, but nothing too heavy there, nothing that would reduce the ceiling's visibilities into the marginal VFR category like they're doing up in the central interior, but some convection building over the Wrangell Mountains, eastern Alaska Range area. Also over the Panhandle, a little bit more in the way of clouds today. Low clouds and fog. Had some, as I mentioned, dense fog advisories out earlier today for some of the Panhandle areas, even over the inside waters. That burning off this afternoon, giving way to sunshine over the central, over most areas there. And then some rain along the western central Arctic coast with southwest flow farther to the west. Forecast for tonight, not much change in the interior. Scattered thunderstorms diminishing along the Alaska Range. And areas of smoke continue in the usual spots in the interior. You had it today, probably continue through tonight, and dry elsewhere around the state with very light wind conditions, virtually no gradient or minimal gradient across the interior, resulting in pretty light wind conditions. Not the case out ahead of that front. Fox Island's got small craft advisory level winds coming in tonight with rain, periods of rain for the eastern Aleutians, and that trying to spread into the Pribilos. Wind and precipitation on the increase for the Alaska Peninsula. Low clouds, fog, and drizzle increasing along the Panhandle in the Gulf of Alaska, actually spreading into Prince William Sound now over toward Kodiak Island, possibly into southern Cook Inlet, as well as Kachemak Bay, Kamishak Bay, possibly Kachemak Bay, but that'll be more the case the following morning, tomorrow night. Otherwise, for tomorrow, again, same story. Temperatures a little cooler with more marine air into south central Alaska and the Susitna Matanuska Valley areas, maybe down 3 to 5 degrees from what the highs were today. A couple of degrees anyway, and low clouds and fog persisting longer tomorrow for the Prince William Sound area, North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island areas. Gale force winds over the Alaska Peninsula, especially the Bering Sea side, looking for southeast winds 35 knots for Thursday. Small craft advisory winds for the remainder of the peninsula. Winds on the increase for Bristol Bay, and a pretty good shot of rain coming into the Alaska Peninsula there, with periods of rain edging in toward the southwest coast, definitely for Nunivak Island and possibly into the Yukon Delta coastal areas, possibly up to St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, low clouds, fog, with light winds, lighter winds now along the western Arctic coast, and also for the eastern Arctic coast, partly to mostly sunny for the north slope into the interior. And the outlook for Friday, that frontal boundary pushing rain farther eastward in across Bristol Bay into the southern Kuskokwim Valley and across the Yukon-Kuskokwim deltas. Periods of rain in the forecast for Friday there up to St. Lawrence Island, but interior areas, scattered shower, isolated thunderstorms, again over the mountainous terrain, otherwise mostly sunny and smoky. Dry for the Arctic coast with light winds, and low clouds and fog will cool temperatures even further over south central Alaska. Still getting into the 70s over the Susitna Valley and central Kenai Peninsula areas, but down, kind of a downward trend for the next couple days temperature-wise for areas east and south of the Alaska Range. Prince William Sound looks pretty cloudy through the day on Friday, but dry, and morning low clouds give way to afternoon sunshine for the Panhandle. About sums it up there. Weak low keeps it wet over the Alaska Peninsula. And for the lows tonight, 40s and 50s over the interior, warmest over the central interior and the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 78 to 83 over the interior, mid-70s for the Susitna Valley, and 65 to 73 for the Kenai Peninsula, mid-70s Copper River Basin. And Panhandle, 65 to 70 about sums it up, and 40 to 52 for the Arctic coast, into the 60s to near 70 for the North Slope, 50s out over the Bering Sea, upper 40s for the eastern Aleutians, lows 40s Arctic coast and North Slope areas, otherwise upper 40s to lower 60s over the interior, as you can see, and upper 40s to mid 50s for south central Alaska, near 50 in Bristol Bay and the Panhandle, lower 50s there, 40s out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, highs 80 to 85 in the greater Fairbanks area, near 80 for the Copper River Basin. Otherwise, 65 to 75 south central Alaska, and upper 60 or mid 60s to lower 70s for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, we've got some IFR for the eastern Arctic coast and VFR for the North Slope, Brooks Range, all of interior Alaska. Looks like marginal VFR spreading up into Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast. Marginal for the Panhandle with IFR along the coast. Kodiak Island, some marginal VFR, and VFR for Bristol Bay, all of the southwest coast, but IFR, Alaska Peninsula, and from Adak eastward to Unalaska Island, northward across the Pribilofs to the Bering Strait, and then marginal VFR for the western Aleutians. And for the afternoon, IFR in the Bering Sea, except the southwest Bering Sea, Adak westward to Shimianatu, marginal VFR there, but quite a swath of IFR from Atka Island eastward to False Pass, and south side of the Alaska Peninsula, north side, VFR, Bristol Bay. Marginal VFR sliding up into southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak, Kachemak Bay areas, southern Kenai Peninsula. Marginal VFR likely pushing northward across Resurrection Bay, Prince William Sound into Passage Canal and Whittier, with marginal VFR over to about Portage in the afternoon, or probably by midday, give or take, and definitely marginal VFR for the North Gulf Coast, and VFR for the afternoon for the Panhandle, but marginal along the coast. Western Arctic coast marginal VFR. Southwestward, Point Lake, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope to Kivalina, otherwise VFR. And for the morning Friday, VFR from the Arctic Ocean southward into the southern Alaska. Marginal VFR, Western Cook Inlet, eastern slopes of Western Alaska Range. At also for the Kenai Peninsula, marginal VFR, Seward, Resurrection Bay, Homer, Kachemak Bay, Kamishak Bay, Kodiak Island, marginal Prince William Sound, into eastern Turnagain Arm, marginal VFR, eastward, North Gulf Coast, along the coast of the Panhandle, IFR, southern Kodiak Island, Sitkinak, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, Pribilofs up to the southwest coast into Togiak Bay, marginal VFR, central Aleutians. And for the afternoon, IFR advancing inland now into the southwest interior, eastward to Dillingham, Togiak, into the southwest mountains, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, IFR, not Prince William Sound, the Bering Strait coast, St. Lawrence Island, and then just a swath of marginal VFR, central Bering Sea and the Aleutians, otherwise IFR out that way, IFR up into southern Cook Inlet, marginal VFR for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and the coastal areas of the Panhandle, inside waters, VFR, as well as interior Alaska. Passes, Anaktuvik and Adigan, both looking pretty good tomorrow. VFR flying, either approach, either entrance. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR once again. And for Rainy, VFR. Windy, looks like a VFR flying day once again for that pass, and the eastern Alaska Range looking pretty good. Open Isabel and Mentasta, VFR flying. Tanita, VFR. Portage, though, VFR becoming marginal throughout the day, and on the eastern entrance, even lower conditions, probably starting out marginal VFR, becoming IFR, possibly as early as midday and through the afternoon. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels about 10,000 feet across the map here. Cold pool out over the western Bering Sea down to 4,000 to 8,000 feet out there, but really not much gradient, thermal gradient aloft here across the state. And icing, we've got areas of about, or considerable moderate there in advance of that frontal system, quite a bit of moisture coming into the Bering Sea there. Slowly sliding eastward to near Nunivak Island in the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise icing free the remainder of the state. And the jet stream at 33,000 feet. Upper level low coming just north of the western Alaska Peninsula by tomorrow afternoon there. And main jet, though, south of the area. Light variable winds over mainland Alaska, the Gulf, and the Panhandle. 9,000 feet, 35 to 50 knots south-southeast wind, starting to make some headway into the west and southwest interior there, and then diminishing central and eastern interior under the upper level ridge from the Panhandle up toward the Old Crow area. And 3,000 feet, south 50 knots, Alaska Peninsula turns south-southeast 50 knots, Nunivak Island, St. Matthew Island area, much lighter westerlies over the Aleutians, and light variable winds, central and eastern interior. Look for considerable moderate chop, surface 6,000 feet for the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the Yukon Delta coast, especially Nunivak Island, light to isolated moderate chop to St. Lawrence Island into Shelikof Strait.
On March 11, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the Pacific coast of Japan generated a tsunami. This series of ocean waves sped towards the island nation, with waves reaching 24 feet high. The result was devastation and utter destruction. Towns were engulfed by water and swept away. Farmland was flooded. Tens of thousands of lives were lost. The National Police Agency reported damages to hundreds of roads, bridges, and more than 100,000 buildings. The surging water flooded rivers and destroyed harbors. In some areas along the coast, tsunami waves reached 6 miles inland. Tsunamis not only cause severe damage when they first strike land, but also as the water recedes back to sea. Tsunamis can inflict this type of damage because of some unique features. As tsunami waves travel across ocean basins, they may be as little as a few centimeters high, but they extend down to the ocean floor. This is different than traditional waves, which are only surface features. Tsunamis can also travel hundreds of miles per hour in the open ocean. As these waves approach a coast, the shallowing ocean floor slows the waves down and pushes the water mass upwards. The quicker the ocean floor transitions from deep to shallow, the greater potential for a higher wave height. So, tsunamis that experience this sudden shift into shallow water can have the height and momentum to pack a serious punch. Unfortunately, Japan found itself in this scenario. This image shows how abruptly the Japanese islands rise out of the ocean. Other coastal areas in the region have much more gradual slopes. The earthquake on March 11th was the most powerful known to hit Japan, and the tsunami it created had the necessary ingredients to make it such a deadly and destructive force. "80 miles east of Japan, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake rocks the ocean floor. This disturbance causes a transfer of energy from the seafloor to the ocean, generating a series of ocean waves known as a tsunami. In about 20 minutes, waves strike the Japanese coastline. Other nations go on high alert because the tsunami will propagate or spread throughout the Pacific Ocean. As the tsunami radiates outward from Japan, it encounters a variety of ocean features, such as ridges and underwater volcanoes, which guide the tsunami and create a complex pattern of scattering and reflective waves. In 8 hours, the waves reach the Hawaiian Islands, and in 9.5 hours, they hit the west coast of the United States. In 16 hours, the tsunami reaches the Indian Ocean and New Zealand, and by 22 hours, the entire Pacific Ocean had been affected. The impact of a tsunami can be highly variable because of the complicated interactions with ocean features and coastline elements. Wave height and speed will differ from place to place. Since tsunamis can be hundreds of miles long and travel thousands of miles away from where they originated, they are considered a worldwide threat when they form. These are the sounds of a tsunami warning. They alert residents that a killer wave is about to strike. These sirens, however, are just a small part of the sophisticated warning systems that played a role in Japan and in the U.S. during the Pacific Ocean tsunami in March 2011. Most tsunamis are generated by an undersea earthquake. Fortunately, Japan has one of the most advanced earthquake early warning systems in the world. It detects tremors, calculates the epicenter, and sends out warnings from over 1,000 seismographs scattered throughout the country. The Japan Meteorological Agency issues the warnings and sends alerts to television and radio channels, the internet, and mobile phone networks. When the earthquake struck 80 miles offshore, warnings were generated in about 3 seconds. The tsunami warnings came 3 minutes later. These take longer because more complex calculations are involved and must factor in ocean data. Since the first tsunami wave struck the coastline within 20 minutes, the advanced warning provided some residents with crucial minutes to reach a safe area. While the earthquake sent powerful tsunami waves westward toward Japan, the tsunami also propagated east into the Pacific Ocean. Here, warnings are issued by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, operated by NOAA in Hawaii. NOAA maintains a large network of buoys with ocean floor sensors that are strategically positioned in the earthquake-prone zones of the Pacific. This system collects vital ocean data for tsunami forecasting. On March 11th, only 25 minutes after the earthquake struck, the first buoy station measured the tsunami and relayed information to Hawaii. Scientists used this data to run models and issue forecasts and warnings to nations throughout the Pacific. From there, local emergency managers decided what actions were appropriate to take for public safety. The earthquake and resulting tsunami devastated the Japanese coastline, causing damage that will take years to repair. While we can't prevent these forces of nature from happening, our early warning systems can help us prepare for the dangers headed our way.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Coastal water forecasts. West-northwest breeze at 10 knots for the north coast. Northwest 15, 5-foot seas on the south coast. Central and southern inner channels, west-northwest breezes at 10 knots with seas at 2 feet. Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, south winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. And then for the day on Friday, southeast winds 20 knots with 4-foot seas for the northern inner channels. Otherwise, variable winds at 10 knots for the central and southern inside waters. Northwest winds 20 knots on the south coast, seas up to 7 feet. West-northwest winds 10 to 15 knots on the north coast with 4 to 5-foot seas. Prince William Sound, variable winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. North Gulf Coast, variable winds at 10 knots, seas 4 feet. Southeast winds 20 knots for the Barren Islands with 4-foot seas, and small craft advisories for Kamishak Bay for southeast winds at 25 knots, 7-foot seas. 20 knots south-southwest winds in the forecast for Cook Inlet tomorrow with 5-foot seas. And then northern Cook Inlet, light variable winds at 10 knots, seas down to 2 feet. Variable winds of 15 knots for southern Cook Inlet. East winds increasing to 30 knots for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay with seas building 7 to 9 feet. Small craft advisories also for the western North Gulf Coast. East winds increasing to 25 knots. Eastern North Gulf Coast, south winds 20 knots. Prince William Sound, light southeast winds at 10 knots. Kodiak Island, south to southwest winds at 15 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas. And then we've got small craft advisories from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev for south to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots, strongest west of Castle Cape. And then gale warnings for the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Southeast winds 35 knots for Thursday with 8-foot seas, and small craft advisories for Bristol Bay. Southeast winds 30 knots. Those become east 30 knots for Bristol Bay on Friday, but behind the front, the Alaska Peninsula will see lighter winds westerly at 20 knots with 5 to 10-foot seas. Small craft advisories for Kodiak Island. Southeast winds 25 to 30 knots with 7 to 9-foot seas. On Alaska Island, South to southeast winds 30 to 35 knots with 10 to 12 foot seas for Thursday. Unimak Island, winds diminishing, becoming southwest and diminishing to 20 knots. Adak and Atka Islands, west-northwest 15 knots. Northwest winds 15 knots for the western Aleutians. And from Shimei to Kiska on Friday, southwest winds 25 knots. On Chitka Island, winds will be south at 25 knots. Adak and Atka, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And for Unimak Island, west winds 15 knots. On Alaska Island, westerlies at 20 knots. For the southwest coast and Pribilof Islands, winds will be southeast tomorrow at 30 knots with 9-foot seas. East winds 30 knots for St. Matthew Island with 10-foot seas. St. Lawrence Island, east winds 25 knots, seas 5 feet. And Norton Sound, lighter winds there out of the east at about 15 knots with seas only at 3 feet. For Friday, Norton Sound, southeast winds 15 knots with 4-foot seas. Otherwise, southwest winds diminishing to 15 knots, seas subsiding to 5 feet for the Pribilof Islands. South winds 25 knots for the northern Bering Sea. And small craft advisories for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, southeast winds at 30 knots. Small craft advisories for the Yukon Delta coast, south winds at 25 knots, southeast 25 for St. Lawrence Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, tomorrow, Thursday, variable winds at 10 knots. Central coast, southwest at 15. And small craft advisories for the western Arctic coast southward to Cape Thompson for south to southwest winds, 25 knots, and 20-knot winds from Cape Thompson to Wales from the south. Those turn east at 20 knots from Wales to Cape Beaufort, 15 to 20 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas on Friday. Western, central, and eastern Arctic coast, winds will be all easterly at 15 knots. For tonight, look for low clouds and fog along the Arctic coast and through the Bering Strait and the northern Bering Sea. Fog and low clouds on the increase, pressing in toward Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet, and into Resurrection Bay and Prince William Sound. Diminishing thunderstorm activity along the Alaska Range. And then low clouds, fog, and drizzle all along the southeast coast, pushing inland to a certain extent. Wind and rain pushing across eastern Aleutians, trying to spread into the Alaska Peninsula. But that washes out tomorrow, but front holds together enough to bring some light rain into the Alaska Peninsula and Pribilofs. Otherwise, another day much like today over the interior, except a little cooler south-central Alaska with more marine air coming in. Lower clouds in the morning in southern Cook Inlet, burning back in the afternoon. And then Friday, cooler yet over south-central Alaska. Rain into the southwest interior and Kodiak Island. No change in the interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.